BBC licence fee unenforceable, says the culture secretary of this government. And it's from the BBC. The irony has no bounds. In 2022, there was a staggering 44,245 prosecutions for TV licence fee evasion. What is even more horrific than that is the conviction rate. Because obviously not everybody prosecuted gets convicted, but out of those 40,654 were convicted, either because they actually went to court and they were found guilty, or they pleaded guilty, or the third, which is a very dubious to say the least. In fact, Al's got a great video on it, is the single justice procedure, where they ignored the notice to prosecute and therefore they went through the single justice procedure. So they were found guilty in their absence without having made any representations whatsoever. So if 40,654 people were convicted in 2022 alone, which is something around the region of 1,000 a week on current statistics, why is it then that the Culture Secretary, a Member of Parliament, has recently said that the BBC licence fee is unenforceable? Now, this is quite a dangerous statement to make because it's somewhat misleading, but there is a hint of explanation which I'll come back to a little bit later. But first of all, if I could implore you to please subscribe to the channel. About half of you still don't do so. I'll be your beacon of truth. I'll be very grateful for that. So let's take a look at this, shall we? So she has said that no options are off the table. And she also is quoted to say that the TV licence fee is unenforceable, particularly as she's been very concerned about the way it's been enforced in the past, particularly vulnerable women targeted for enforcement action. And the BBC itself has accepted that. That's because there's a huge disparity on the number of women prosecuted as against men, and obviously the conviction rates follow. But that is a contradictory statement. Why does she say it's unenforceable, but at the same time she's concerned with how it's being enforced? Now, there's only two things I can think of here. Now, the first is that there is a hint about what might happen in the future. More about that in a moment. But the only other thing I can think of is the evidential basis upon which this may be quote-unquote enforceable. Because I've said many times before, how on earth can you be prosecuted for something when they require the evidence to prove that you've watched or recorded live TV without a license? And that includes any TV channel broadcast from anywhere in the world, on any device, whether or not it's the BBC, and any BBC content on BBC iPlayer, which is the BBC content which is not necessarily live, but it's on iPlayer because that was the little loophole that they wanted to get round. The evidential basis for prosecuting somebody is obviously very difficult. How can they prove that you've done that? The only way they could prove you've done that is that they've got access to your records, your history of, say, logging into BBC iPlayer, for example, or they've got some other kind of evidence which they're not likely to get, say, for example, from Sky or from Virgin, unless they've got some kind of reason to have access to that information. Now, there are certain ways of getting access to evidence that other companies have, etc. We call those a Norwich Pharmacal order, whereby the court will order a third party that is somehow caught up in the wrongdoing of something to disclose some evidence or information that they have. But in this situation, I don't see how they would be tied up in the wrongdoing. Because it's just, if someone is just, or a company is just an innocent third party to something, they'll generally not be ordered to disclose that information. So in this situation, I very much doubt that that would work. But without that, and without any kind of evidence, and without having, let's say, obtained a warrant to attend your property and then prove somehow that you're watching or recording live TV, how on earth are they going to get the evidence? That might be why she's saying it's unenforceable, because I think it's incredibly difficult to prove something like that. And certainly if you're in the position, they can't very well ask you, prove that you're not doing that. You can't prove a negative. But at the same time, she's making this statement, which is self-contradictory here. She says it's unenforceable, and particularly I'm concerned with the way it's been enforced in the past. She says that they recognise there's problems with the licence fee. Fewer and fewer people are paying it. According to the BBC, 80% pay the current licence fee, which I think is still quite a lot, quite frankly, because to pay the licence fee to watch any TV on any device anywhere in the world, I quite frankly think that is a really odd setup and situation that we are in. The BBC, of course, gets most of its income from the licence fee, receiving around £3.7 billion, and which is around 2/3 of its income from it. However, and here's the really interesting bit, what seems to be the case is that in 2027, this whole system comes back under review. This charter, if you like, is an agreement between the BBC and the government as to how the government sets the law in line with what the BBC wants in how it charges you the TV license fee. Let me know down below if you agree with the license fee or not. Now, I don't suppose that all of the 80% of people that pay the fee agree with paying the fee. I personally think, and I've held this view for a long time now, in fact, today is my 5th year anniversary on this channel, and I've held this view for as long as I can remember running this channel. But as it's my 5th year anniversary, very quick plug, I've revamped the memberships scheme to this channel. We now have trainee black belt, master and grandmaster levels with lots of different things added into those. There's going to be lots more exclusive videos, exclusive shorts, free gifts, things that I think are going to be really useful to you, such as criminal identifier sprays, such as alarms, such as other devices and things that I think are going to be really useful, which I'm going to keep secret right now, but they'll be available as gifts if you join as a member. Please do support my channel here. This is my 5th year anniversary of uploading almost every day for 5 years now, believe it or not. I've been on YouTube a lot longer than that. My first videos were back in 2006, with YouTube coming around in 2005. It's YouTube's 20th anniversary, literally a couple of days ago, and it's my 5th year anniversary for this channel. Check out the memberships. There's lots more there. And lots of things, the reason that popped into mind is because there's going to be lots of things that I put on there that are relevant and particularly useful for BBC license stuff. So I'll be putting on template letters, template documents, all sorts of different correspondence that you may fire off. I'm going to build a library on there, all of which are going to be available for members. Because if you've been on top of my videos just recently, I've had all sorts of different issues as a consumer. Now, when I have these issues with those companies, I can't say, "Oi, I'm a barrister, I know what I'm doing." I can't do that, and I don't say that. If they know, or if it's unavoidable because they've seen something on my channel or whatever, then that's unavoidable. But I can't abuse that position, and I won't do so. What I can do is put together letters and templates and, for example, template particulars of claim, we call it. That's when you set out your claim against a company, or defense if you're sued for something. For example, all sorts of things to do with parking charges. There'll be lots of things available on there. But back to TV license. Now, what I think is going to happen is we have a culture secretary here, which this 2027 review is going to be within the purview of this government and within the purview of this culture secretary. Now, when she says it's unenforceable, I think she means that it's unenforceable in the way that how can they possibly enforce something when they don't have the evidence or can't have the evidence, and it's really difficult, and more and more people are not paying it, choosing not to pay it, think it's unfair. Let me know in the comments if you think it's unfair. Just write the word unfair and it will stand out to everybody. It's easier for me to see, to tally that up. In fact, I might do a poll. If I do a poll, I'll link the poll below as well. Vote on the poll. I think that her view on reading from this is that they're going to look at all sorts of different structures, different options, different ways of potentially replacing it, doing away with it. Obviously, the BBC's got to be funded. I mean, I'm not completely against the BBC, but I mean, the BBC has been under some severe criticism recently with some of the very questionable things that it's put out and supported and so on. So it's certainly not without its severe criticism. Lisa Nandy, Culture Secretary, says that this license fee is deeply regressive. And I, for one, agree. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that as well. I think it's deeply regressive. Why should it be fair that you pay for a license to watch anything other than who the money goes to? I think that's really odd. It's a little bit like saying you have to pay a gym fee. Why would you pay a gym fee that goes to one particular gym if you go to a different gym? It's really bizarre. But that's essentially what we've got here. You pay your license fee if you watch or record live TV from any broadcast company anywhere in the world when the money goes to the BBC. Really bizarre. Now, you might remember that I contacted the press office some time ago and I asked them a couple of questions. How on earth would anybody know what is or is not a broadcast company? And therefore, if you watch their programs, you need to pay the license fee. And secondly, would watching somebody like me, even if live, attract the license fee? And they didn't really answer the question for either of those. Firstly, they said there is no list of these companies. So there is no way of checking off a list of any sort to see whether or not you're supposed to pay the license fee. But with regard to me, they just said, well, most people in your situation doing this kind of stuff probably wouldn't attract the license fee. Now, that's not good enough, because if someone's going to be prosecuted, there needs to be absolutely no doubt whatsoever, especially when it's, in my view, quite unfair when it goes through the single justice procedure. And more often than not, you're going to be convicted in your absence. Because if you don't put up a defense, what chance do you have? You're likely to be convicted. And that is why over 90% of people prosecuted with this offense are convicted. I think that's utterly unfair, and I think it's wrong. I've said in previous videos, and I will say it again, you should not be pleading guilty to something you didn't do, and you certainly shouldn't ignore it, because if you ignore it, it gets worse. My concern with articles like this is you may only read the headline, and it's from the BBC. The irony has no bounds. It's from the BBC. It says, BBC license fee unenforceable, says the culture secretary of this government. So if the BBC is reporting that the BBC license fee is unenforceable, as quoted from the culture secretary, many people will read that and have some reasonable excuse, perhaps, not legal advice, by the way, but many people may feel that they have a reasonable excuse. They won't say, well, the BBC reported that it was unenforceable, and that was quoted by the culture secretary. So this is now, in my view, a very big problem moving forward. This could be a turning point that changes everything. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I've got lots more to talk about, but I will save it for other videos. Please do subscribe for those. And happy 5th year anniversary to all of us on my channel here. Thank you so much for watching. The hundreds of millions of you that have watched over the past 5 years. I'm really grateful. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.